From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Closing arguments start this week in the prosecution by special counsel John Durham of Igor Danchenko on charges of lying to the FBI. Danchenko was a figure in the FBI fiasco in 2016, suspecting collusion between Russia and the Donald Trump campaign. The rest of the press is not covering this trial, so we will, and we'll tell you what we're learning. Plus, Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister of Britain, all but abandons her pro-growth economic plan under pressure from her own party. What this tells us about the British ruling Tories, the UK economy, and what it means for the United States as interest rates rise here as they are also in Britain. Welcome, I'm Paul Gigot with the Wall Street Journal opinion pages, and I'm here with my colleagues Joe Sternberg and Kim Strassel. Welcome to you both. Kim, you've been following the Durham trial from the beginning, and he made his prosecution case last week. What have we learned?
So officially, it's Igor Danchenko who's on trial, and he's on trial for 5 counts of lying to the FBI. But what I find interesting about this case is, while in theory the FBI is the victim here, how much Mr. Durham has used this trial to put the FBI in the hot seat as well, too, and really tell a story of incompetence or political bias. You can take your pick, maybe a bit of both. But what we have now found overridingly is that the FBI, despite the fact that this probe went on for years, when you count in Bob Mueller's look at it and his probe of it as well, too, the FBI by October of 2016 had sat down with Christopher Steele, the official author of this dossier, had offered him $1 million to be able to try to confirm or legitimize anything in his dossier. He was unable to do that. By January, they'd sat down with Danchenko, who was the primary source for Mr. Steele for most of this dossier. He told them that Mr. Steele had misstated or exaggerated a lot of what he provided, that a lot of it was gossip and hearsay, and that he could not confirm anything that was in it. And yet the FBI, as I mentioned, moved forward on the basis of this. The dossier ended up becoming public. They sat quiet. They never said anything. All through the Mueller probe, through various other things that happened over those years, all suggesting there was some sort of collusion, when the FBI knew that the central claim for this was simply had no credibility.
It's extraordinary that we're only learning this now, 6 years later, when we should have learned it in real time. I can still recall January of 2017, when the news about this Steele Dossier, that's Christopher Steele's far-fetched dossier, which became public. BuzzFeed published it, and then I think CNN published it as well. And it looked fanciful to anybody who, far-fetched to anybody who actually looked at the details of it, particularly since there was no backup for it. And yet you're telling us, and now we've learned through John Durham, that the main source for it couldn't prove any of it. And it's an astonishing kind of dereliction not to have any of this ever been made public, except for John Durham. And I want to ask him, is it true that if Bill Barr had not appointed Durham, that we would not still know much of this?
We wouldn't know any of it, Paul. And I think another sort of very damning detail in this, and it was highlighted by our colleague Holman Jenkins in his column, is that one of the other things we found out as part of this prosecution is that not long after the FBI debriefed Danchenko in January, and he essentially admitted that there was no backing for any of these claims that were in the dossier, they put him on the payroll as a confidential human source. Just another little titillating detail, he was given hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that over the coming years and remain. And Holman Jenkins sort of intimated or suggested that, one of the benefits of putting Danchenko as a human source on the FBI is it made sure he kept quiet and that no one could learn anything about him, because he was a super secret FBI source. And so he couldn't be referred to in documents that went to Congress or in any way outed. Well, that was really convenient for the FBI in the end. And it does seem that there were a lot of steps taken to cover up what they did. Look, how could the Bob Mueller probe work for 22 months and not tell us any of this? Well, maybe because a lot of the people who were involved in Crossfire Hurricane, this investigation, ended up working on the Mueller team. So if it hadn't been for Durham, no, I don't think we'd know any of this, Paul.
Joe Sternberg, I got a side hustle for you if you ever looking for some spare change. Basically, just type up a fanciful document claiming ties between the next presidential candidate and some foreign power, Russia, China, you could pick it, and then send it around, particularly if it's somebody who the rest of the press corps does not want to win. And who knows, maybe the FBI will pay you $1 million to see if you can prove your claims.
Well, I mean, Paul, that's a very tempting offer, but I'm just not sure. I don't think I'm creative enough to come up with the things that this crew did. I just want to point out here, sort of as an observer on this issue, that, I mean, certainly the details that we are learning from this legal proceeding about what happened in the case of the Steele dossier are outrageous. And we've also learned a lot of outrageous details about the use to which that information was put within the FBI long past the time when they knew that it wasn't credible. But it's worth remembering that this matters not just because of the details of Crossfire Hurricane or any of the other direct implications here, but also because we live in an era where the FBI and the Department of Justice are involving themselves in a growing number of highly political cases. I mean, whether it's other cases involving Donald Trump, such as the documents at Mar-a-Lago, whether it's the potential that there could be a case involving Joe Biden's son Hunter and some of his various activities. And the more political these cases become, the more important it becomes that the FBI and the DOJ are irreproachable and that the public can trust them to really stay within the lines and not try to play fast and loose with some of these cases. And that is why these outrageous details that we're learning about this case are so troubling and echo far beyond the confines of the specific details that we're learning about here.
Kim, I gather that given what you described, whether or not Durham gets a conviction here of Danchenko is less significant than the facts that have been uncovered. I know there's no question Durham wants a conviction, particularly after he didn't get one against Michael Sussman, another person involved in this for lying to the FBI, although we did learn some very interesting things from that trial. So however this turns out at trial, what's next for Durham?
Yeah, I agree with you, Paul. One interesting little detail here, which I would urge people to bear in mind, is that when Durham brought that Sussman trial, he had to do it in D.C. He had a Washington, D.C. jury. I hate to always be dismissive of any jury verdict, although D.C. juries kind of fall into a category of their own. I mean, this is a jurisdiction that both for Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton voted 92% for one candidate. So you're not going to get a very wide spectrum in your jury pool there. So he lost that case. This case is being tried in Virginia. So it could result in a different outcome. We will see. We will likely have a verdict, I would wager, sometime this week. But then Durham has indicated that he is wrapping this up. The signs are there. And if that is the case, then the next thing he's going to do is put together his report, which is required under the special counsel provisions that he is working under. And it'll go to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. Garland suggested he'd like to make it public. We will see if he follows up on that. You know that there's going to be enormous pressure, especially from Republicans in Congress, for that to be made not just public, but public and largely unredacted.
Yeah, I think if it's not allowed to be made public by Merrick Garland, I would be surprised if it didn't leak. And of course, at this stage, that goes without saying, the public should know all of this. There's not any chance that national security is implicated here. And by the way, national security was used as a cover for the FBI not to, as you suggested, not to come clean about all this much earlier.